So, warm welcome to everyone to this, I think it's the 10th teaching on our studies of Maitreya on Buddha nature. That's my translation, our translation, what we're working with. We're going through this book. And it is, of course, a commentary to the text from Asanga and Maitreya, which is the main teaching on the topic called in English Buddha nature, or the essence of those who went beyond, let's say, tathagatagarbha, tathagata, those who went beyond, garbha, the essence. So we call that Buddha nature. But we're looking at the essence, the quintessence, the very nature, the very character of Buddha. That's what we're looking at. So let's start in the very, very good way. Waking ourselves up a little bit, remembering who we are, where we are. In a Dharma teaching, we're here on earth in a human body, and somewhere in our lives we've met Dharma, we've met wonderful teachings, and so when we come to a teaching session like this, we're like having been underwater and coming up for a breath of air. This is the oxygen of Dharma, this is the life breath of existence. And a lot of the week, a lot of the time, a lot of the day, we are plunged into existence. It's very much the topic of today. So when we have a moment for teaching, we leave all that stuff out there. And we just try to spend an hour and a half totally, purely with the Dharma teachings, doing our very best to absorb and understand, because we think of ourselves as an investment for everybody. And this lifeblood of Dharma, this, can you say, it's like what goes into our bloodstream, this health of Dharma that's coming into our life in this existence. We treasure it, we really want to nurture it and make our lifeblood of existence healthier and healthier. So let's start with our prayers, which help us to have this very, very good state of mind, caring for our fellow beings. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on till we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through our practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well. May they live long, be healthy, be well provided for. May they have good friends and find respect. Live in places of peace, places of plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being totally beyond suffering and attain the great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavati shameta shatru Om kore mara jite karote keyorite jovati oloyani Pishuddha nimale malapa naye kukure kaka grase grasana umuki paramuki amuki shamedavane sawa graha bandhanane nigritva sawa bhava pravadina vimukta marapasha savitva puta mudra anutgatita sava mare putsarita parishuddhe bigashantu Savamara Kama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So as usual, we start by zooming in to this text of all the teachings in Buddhism. There are the sutras in the Shastra, sutra which come from Buddha directly, and the Shastra which analyze for us the teachings of the Buddha and present them in wonderful ways. Amongst the Shastra, then there are those based on the first and the second and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. This Shastra is based on the third and final turning of the wheel of Dharma, which deals with Shunyata as Buddha nature, as we're studying. The text itself from Asanga is inspired by Buddha Maitreya, is in three parts: the good beginning, which is the title and the homage, the good middle, but really it means the main body of the text, and then the good end, which is the dedication. So in the good middle, we have 7 Vajra points, which are in 2 sections. The first 3, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, are the refuges as a result to be attained, and the final 4, Buddha nature, enlightenment, enlightened qualities, enlightened activity. These are the cause for that result being attained. In these 7 Vajra chapters, we are now in the 4th Vajra chapter, which itself is in 3 parts. First, the 3 great statements, or 3 great reasons they're called, which we covered. All beings have Buddha nature. Buddha nature is the same in everyone, and this gives a potential, 5 sorts of potential. That's the first part of the Buddha nature chapter, the 3 statements. Next come 10 detailed explorations. That's where we are just now. And at the end, 9 examples. So in our 10 detailed explanations, we, in the last session, considered the first and the second together. The titles are quite interesting because they are taken together. And the second one's called cause. But the first one isn't called result. For good reason, but it's not. It's called the essence, the very essential character, the essential nature of this essence of all those who've gone beyond, the tathagatagarbha, Buddha nature. It sounds funny to say the nature of Buddha nature, because then we're getting kind of the nature of the nature. Doesn't sound right. So we're looking at the essential character of what in English we call Buddha nature, but we're looking really at the essential character of all of those who got there, who became Buddhas, who transcended. What is it that they became? What is it that they are? And in particular, what is it that they are, and that we saw in the first 3 chapters? We saw what Buddhas are, what Dharma is, what the Noble Sangha is. What is now that inside us as our potential? What is its essential character? And we saw that was purity. That purity has many components like wisdom and compassion and peace and many qualities, but we're looking at the essential character. Where does the wisdom come from? The purity. Where does the compassion come from? A pure mind, a pure heart. Where does the power to help being come from? The purity, the fact that we're not limited, corrupted. The fact that we are pure, totally pure, 100% pure. That's where the power to help comes from. It's where all the qualities come from. So we looked at that purity through 3 examples. We looked at the example of the jewel and of space and water and so on. And the second point is, how do you get it? Basically, how do you get it? So this is called the cause. And we're back in this world, which is in fact, can you say, it's the essential message of this whole text. The 2 very different natures, a timeless, changeless nature, which just is, always will be. It's the isness of whatever you like, the isness of our mind, the isness of the universe, the isness of everything, a changeless isness, very hard for us to get our head around. But in order for that changeless isness to become our wealth, our experience, for us to become that, then we need to work with things of a very different nature, totally changing, illusory but powerful nature that masks that isness. This is our relative mind. This is our stream of consciousness, driven by ego and everything that ego created. We are the living presence of our own past creations. Sorry, it's just a passing thought, but I tend to share my passing thoughts. I've sometimes thought of selling this place I'm living in just now. And a long time ago, I think we invited an estate agent to come and give an opinion. And then all of a sudden you see the place that's so familiar through somebody else's eyes. You know, it is very old-fashioned. It is a house that belongs to a period, the 1940s. Probably most people who want to buy it would just tear it down and put up a modern cube, you know, very kind of black and white and minimalist. But seeing the place you've created or that you're in through other eyes is quite embarrassing in a way, you know, that when you invite somebody into your house for the first time. So we are the result of all our past creations. That's what we are. And it's very busy. It's buzzing all the time. It's keeping us interested with these thoughts, this reality we're living with our karma. It's totally immersive. So that has to go. That has to go. And where we finished last time was in looking at what has to go, which is of a not lasting nature, which is of an interdependent nature, which is of a suffering nature. What has to go, we looked at it in 4 key areas. And then later we're going to be looking at 4 key antidotes to what we got ourselves into, what we are. Last time we looked at them, let's say, academically, from the outside. We saw 4 obstacles. The first one was a lack of, a hostility to Mahayana. And this is mainly the problem of sentient beings, let's say, beings in the 6 realms. they have, to different degrees, a hostility to Mahayana Dharma. So that's one thing that's kept us from enlightenment. Hostility to Dharma, mainly looking at, in general, at beings in the 6 realms of existence. The second one is strong belief in a self, a persona, a me, a kind of a fixed me. And in particular, when that belief becomes an indoctrination, when it's reinforced by your religion that has a credo where you believe in a divine self or a personal self, a God or a soul, this kind of thing. So that is the second type of obstacle. There is a sense of self in most beings in the 6 realms, but in human beings with a strong religious indoctrination, this becomes a big obstacle. That's our second obstacle that needs to go. The third obstacle that needs to go, so that we recognize our Buddha nature, is fear. Fear of existence. Fear of what the Bodhisattva path would involve, which is being involved in existence, helping beings, because that is for the Bodhisattva, that's the only place you can get the training. How are we going to learn compassion without compassionate interaction with others? You can't learn it from a book. You can learn ideas about compassion, but they won't make you compassionate. They'll make you knowledgeable about ideas about compassion. Does that make sense? They won't make you compassionate. What will make you compassionate is walking the talk. You need to actually get out there helping other beings. Then all of these Buddha's teachings, Bodhisattva teachings, come to life. You see the real meaning of generosity, giving yourself, the real meaning of being involved in helping other people and staying morally pure. And all the other paramitas, you see just how life is the only training ground that's possible for that, for developing that. So fear of life, other people, their realities, it's very, very real, this. I think everybody here, helps people or has helped one person. Bloody difficult. People are difficult. And they don't do what you want. They don't do what you expect. They've got their own karma. They've got their own lives. Our own efforts are limited by who we are. It really is not easy. And that's wonderful, because the fact that it's not easy means we have an opportunity to develop strength, to develop wisdom, to develop skill. People with skill, they make things look easy. People who do things physically, you watch them, whatever they're doing, skiing, doing martial arts or something, they make it look so easy. I saw the other day, there's a 90-year-old 7th Dan Aikido woman, right, teacher. And she just flips people over with her finger. And it's not the kind of, the imitation stuff. There's a lot of that on internet, where you get Aikido teachers just knocking people around with a tiny thing. But there are the real ones. So that's skill. That's skill. It comes through so much training. You wouldn't mess with her. And you're on the floor. You've got a broken back, or you're finished. On people who, when you're stuck with your computer, and and somebody comes along like this, and it's fixed. For them it's easy, because it's so crystal clear. So skill. Fear of samsara is the third obstacle. And it tends to make one want to just be alone and work with one's own mind, which is also good in the right time, right place in our journey. But in general, this fear of samsara is an obstacle. So that's number 3. And we find that particularly in the Shravakas. So now we're looking at Buddhists, but Buddhists who can't go the whole way to enlightenment, to recognition of their true nature. Shravakas. The 4th obstacle is a lack of compassion. Let's say a lack of an abundance of compassion. And this is an obstacle particularly with what we call the Pratyeka Buddhas, because they are very skillful, they are very strong, they're very knowledgeable, but they don't help beings very much, meaning not on a vast scale, but those they do help, they help by example, not by teachings, blah, 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 not by training other people, but by example. Anyway, we're not studying Pratyeka Buddhas today, and there aren't that many around in our world, so you're not going to come across one. So it's academically interesting, but practically, hello Ken, I've met a Pratyeka Buddha. What do I do? What's the advice? I'm not going to get that phone call, So, but in the books, we need to know. And just leave that there. So that's where we got to right last time. That's the academic approach, the external approach to these teachings. We've seen enlightenment as an idea, we've seen 4 obstacles, okay, and who they're present in, good. Now for the yogic approach, the Kagyu approach, we're not looking at ideas and a map of existence out there. Everything, always, we bring back to 2 things, same thing really, but to 2 things. We try and say, what does this mean in terms of mind? And then we bring it back to ourselves. What does this mean in terms of my mind? And that's where it becomes incredibly relevant, and where it becomes the working area. As we work with our Dharma teachers, then we'll see how relevant this is. We're not enlightened yet, we're not fully enlightened. These obstacles are there inside us. So we get, how can you say, the example. These things are epitomized out there, just like in life. Things are epitomized by certain types of people. Amongst humans, we see people who are running around after money all the time. Money, profit, is what their whole life's about. So we can see that quality taken to this extreme. We can see people who can't be bothered, don't want to know about anything, don't want to know, can you go nowhere, just be comfortable, and so on. We see people who are into sex and attraction, making themselves attracted, being attracted. We see that epitomized in some humans, some animals too. I mean, dogs going around sniffing bottoms. I mean, humans don't quite do that, going around in the high street sniffing each other's bottoms and trying it on. But it's the same kind of, how can you say, primal urge that's, and then, when it's with dogs, it can be with anybody. When we look at birds, sometimes birds have a partner for life. It's different. They're not promiscuous. So these things, all I'm trying to say is, when we looked in the theory and we saw these are the obstacles of beings in the six realms, these are the obstacles of those with a strong religious indoctrination, it's to give us the flavor of what we're looking at. But then now we're looking at that in ourselves. So then we do this incredible work in ourselves, so real, of what are the six realms in me, and how are they holding back my recognition, my meditation experience of Buddha nature. So when we look at the six realms, then, for instance, the Deva realm, pride is called pride, that's part of it, but it really means complacency. Complacency where we take our karmic blessings for granted and we are kind of very comfortable in them. Our karmic blessings are like your favorite armchair and your favorite house slippers and the best cup of cocoa, and there you are, comfortable. So at the moment you've got health, maybe. You've got friends, and you've got a roof over your head, and you've got enough money to survive, and all these impermanent, fragile, vulnerable things. We don't realize their interdependence, their impermanence, their fragility, and we identify with them. This word, if you want the Deva realm, it is identifying. Your identity is your wealth. Your wealth defines you. So we look at that. We look at how we are in society, and where we are, where we live, your social status, how you feel about that, how you feel better than some people and not quite so good as other people because they have more and other people have less. When we look inside our mentality, even if we're not arrogant and proud in that sense, you'll find this kind of complacency. And the Tibetan is wonderful for that. It is Ngajal. The word Ngajal, it's got a Nga at the beginning. Ngajal. Nga means me. Jal means winning. I'm winning. I'm on a winning streak. So far, so good. So far, so good. So far, so good. That kind of mentality is an obstacle to our enlightenment. Jealous God's realm. Who are we in competition with? Actively or just in our whole mentality? Is there any jealousy there? And if so, that is holding you back. It's holding back what this first area is, hostility to Mahayana Dharma. This complacency, jealousy, and then we go through the six realms. That's not the teaching today. It's not the teaching in the commentary, but it's just to try and explain what we mean when we say the inner nature of this second of our 10 points, which is the cause for getting enlightened, the cause for recognizing Buddha nature is to understand the four obstacles and to overcome them. So the first obstacle is this hostility to Mahayana Dharma, our pride stands in the way of that. Our pride, our complacency. Why? Because we're spending time and effort to keep ourselves in that comfortable place. And then we're wasting a lot of time through jealousy in comparing ourselves with others, comparing our situation with other situations, and so on. And there's something in there that causes us to waste a lot of time to achieve whatever status it is. So the 6 realms are standing in the way of our... So we find the 6 realms in us, and then the Bodhisattva teachings have the remedies for our pride, our jealousy, and all the other mind poisons that are totally relevant to being in the 6 realms. It's nothing to do really with having a human body, which is secondary. We're talking about our mind. As long as your mind is in that complacency, is in that jealousy, is in the desire of the human realm, is in the ignorance of the animal realm, where what do animals do? Mating, nesting, feeding. How much of our day is spent in the ignorance, in the sort of lower awareness state of no, cooking, shopping, washing up, all of that around that temporary moment of getting food in. I mean, we need to eat, but how much of time is in a dumbed down mind that's a food mind, where we are what they call in French un tube digestif ambulant, a walking digestive tract. Are we here on earth to spend so many hours shopping, cooking, cleaning, eating? Well, so that's things we look at, how much of our time and energy, but especially our mind, is gone in all of that. Well, that's just the eating part, not to mention the nesting, making yourself a nice nest, decorating, redecorating, buying new stuff for the garden and all the rest of it. I can tell you a lot about that. I have a lot of this obstacle. I've got a nice nest, but mating, nesting, feeding, all of this is the animal part. So we look at that. We try and understand, how is this getting in the way? How is this absorbing my mind all the time? My mind is invested so much in food and stuff and property and so on. That's stopping our mind from uncovering its true nature. We're there again. We're going from one shop to the next because they've not got the right sort of pasta. Spaghetti. Here where I live, Barilla, number 5, is a really good spaghetti, but not all shops have it. It's the one that sells out the quickest. So if you can't get it here, then you're going to spend another 10 minutes going to another shop because they've got it and it tastes better, and so on. All day long, day after day, this stuff is going on. And then the spirit realms, the hell realms, where we're lost in our own misery, we're lost in our own suffering. It just preoccupies the mind, as is normal for a human. So in all this process of examining the 6 realms in us, we learn on the Bodhisattva path to do it in a healthy way. We're not beating ourselves up because we've got an ego. We are just seeing how it is, what our mind does moment after moment, day after day. We learn how to do that through mindfulness and awareness. and then that's who we are. So in a very healthy, very positive way, we start to try and shift things. We start to disappear from the Deva realm, disappear from the human realm, disappear from the animal realm. Practically, we still need to eat, we still need a home, but we invest ourselves less in that. It's not what we're about. It's not what defines us. So anyway, that's one obstacle, and how very practically we do need to recognize it and work with it. The second obstacle is the power of deeply rooted belief in a self, in particular through inherited, indoctrinated religious beliefs. That's very, very interesting. So last time when we looked at that, I think I mentioned the Tibetan word mutekpa, or the Sanskrit word tirtika, which is often mistranslated, is badly translated as heretic, for instance. The Buddhists and the heretics. It's not got a nice ring to it, and it's not. You see this in books. Tirtika is translated as heretics or non-Buddhist. But actually what my teachers told me is this is a respectful, nice term. You're not talking about people, they're heretics. It means those who are on the rungs of the ladder, those who are on the same journey as us. They're looking for the truth. They're looking for what it's really all about. And there's a feeling that it's pretty good. What they're doing with themselves, the way they believe, what they believe in, their religious rituals, the ideas that they've had in them all their life because they inherited them. There's something good in there. It's just not quite right. So that's respectful, because these people are ready to go in so many ways. They already have, according to their faith, a notion of love, of compassion, a notion of what we would call refuge. Something, they feel something is so much greater than them, and noble and worthy and sacred and holy. So, but at the same time, one recognizes these beliefs are strong. And now, in the reality of this, we see this in the Buddhist world. We see people in the West who, most of them weren't born Buddhists. They're born Christian, Jewish, whatever, or with no belief. And in the no belief, then that means they've got the beliefs of their age. I'm reading a book just now. It's a novel written in 1946. It's totally unpublishable today. The mentality is so politically incorrect. Very honest. It's exactly how people thought when I was a kid. And the words they used and the way they looked at each other in society, all to do, with the role of women, the role of colored people, and all this kind of thing, is totally, the language, the thinking is unacceptable. But it's a very relevant book for its time. So some things are very indoctrinated. So in the Buddhist world, we see people who come from the mentality of their time, with all the assumptions of their age that we have, including scientific assumptions, medical assumptions, all of those things. So they're of no belief, because they don't have a religion. They're not Christian or Buddhist or Islamic, but they sure do have beliefs. They have the beliefs that for them are truth in the relative world. So we find in the Buddhist world people who come, they become Buddhists, but very often they get to a point of development where their deeply ingrained Christianity, it's quite interesting, through their Buddhist practice, they discover the real meaning of what for them is the real meaning of Christianity. And it's so deeply implanted because they've sung their hymns, they've had tears in their eyes of devotion when they were a kid or whatever. So they go back to being Christian because it's so deeply ingrained. It feels like what people call their roots. Many people very keen to find their roots, who they truly are. So we look into this in ourselves. It's very strong in me, if I can give my own example. I've always been deeply moved by music, and especially by sacred music. And 3 seconds of that can get you. Whew, you're 100% loving Jesus, just after a few notes of music. It goes deep. It's beyond thinking and other things. It's just plumbed in. It's almost like it's genetic. So we have to find there's something very useful in there. And there's something that can also be an obstacle. So that takes a lot of underwater diving in your subconscious and finding what is useful, what is an obstacle. We have to find that ourselves and learn to know ourselves. So that's the second obstacle, and it becomes very real. Yeah, like with the sacred music, for instance. I mean, Tibetan sacred music, they've got 1 or 2 nice tunes. It's quite a relief when they do those, if you're listening to prayers. But a lot of it is, it doesn't do what Christian music can do for me, And then, just my personal prejudices. But a lot of Tibetan music's influenced by Chinese opera. And you've got these screeching high voices, which you need earplugs. And it's not so good. If you've got my kind of indoctrination, this is what I'm trying to say. It can't do in 3 seconds what a Barmadict or something like that can do, in Christian music. And a lot of it is, or even lower than that. That doesn't do it for me, right? It sounds like you need to run and get a bucket because somebody's going to be sick, And if you do it yourself and you learn it, it actually does do things to your breathing and to your chakra system. But just like that, hearing like the Jutta monks go, then it doesn't have the same effect. So all of this is really interesting. We look in our spiritual scape and our senses, what triggers faith when we see it, what triggers faith when we hear it, what triggers faith if we smell it, like the incense, what is helpful for transcendence. And we need to unmuddle all of that and channel whatever's good into the right tubes, and whatever is clashing with natural Dharma, natural awakening, then we need to understand it and get rid of it. Then the third obstacle, is this fear of samsara, this fear of the world and all of its complexity. And, we're aiming for purity, but there's a lot of impurity out there. and the world triggers our own impurity. That's why we're afraid of it. What we consider impurity is our anger, what upsets us, what brings us lust and desire, what brings us all the different mind poisons. The triggers are out there, and once we are engaged and very actively and in a dedicated, committed way, engaged, then engaged with the world and engaged with people, we have to be very careful what it triggers in us. That's why when we look out there at the Shravakas, they flee, they run away. They flee to solitude, they flee to monasteries, they flee to safe places, hermitages, ashrams. Inside themselves, they flee inside the mind of serenity into a quieter and quieter, smoother and smoother space, which is wonderful. It brings freedom from our own suffering if we go into that meditative space of shamatha very, very deeply. But the benefit for others is very little. It won't take us to enlightenment. It won't help us on the bodhisattva path where we need to engage. So we need to understand that and to see it inside ourselves. I remember Akon Rinpoche saying, it's very curious. There are so many people who are plunged in worldly life, not through their own choice. They have to earn a living, they have to look after their family and all those kind of things, and who long to be in retreat. So they're in the world dreaming of retreat. But then when they go to retreat, then they're thinking of outside and how nice it was to have friends and people to have a glass of wine with, or you're not stuck in your retreat, so you can go for a walk, and you can do this. So they're in the world dreaming of retreat, and they're in retreat dreaming of the world. You're not where you are. You're dreaming of something else. So we need to look inside ourselves, see these contradictions, the dream of solitude, your dream of solitude. If only I had the chance, if I had this, and then we dream of this ideal place to go and meditate with beautiful instruction, and there all of your lovely things are going to open up and your mind's going to discover wonders. And we've got kind of that dream. Obstacle. Can be an obstacle. Can be a great help. There, you need a teacher. There are times when we need to let go the world and go into retreat. It would be better. And there are times when retreat is an escape mechanism rather than a sacred mechanism. I've known at least a couple of people who've used a 3-year retreat as an excuse to get out of their couple. They didn't have the guts to get out and just say, enough. They said, I want to go to retreat. Nobody can argue with that if they respect your Buddhism. That was really the case, really. And the person who did it knew it. Some people do it without knowing they're doing it. They're kind of kidding themselves. These people weren't even kidding themselves about retreat. They couldn't see any other way of getting out, and they thought, well, in the meantime, a couple of years of retreat can't do any harm, do me some good. It's complicated. So this is what I'm trying to say. We have the theory out there, 4 types of beings, beings in the 6 realms and beings with strong religious belief, and now we're looking at Shravakas. But the really interesting thing is looking at the Shravaka inside yourself. Is it an escape mechanism? Or is it truly the best thing for you right now to go to solitude and settle your mind, which in the Bodhisattva path, it really can be. There are times we absolutely need not to be engaged socially, but to be working on our mind. But mainly, our teacher knows that best. They see when it can be more of an escape from responsibility than a meditative necessity. So anyway, that's the 3rd obstacle. The 4th obstacle is a lack of compassion. Again, when we apply it to ourselves, we're not looking at a total lack of compassion. None of us have that. We've all got some compassion. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. But the question is, how much? How much compassion have you got? Of all your tens of thousands of thoughts each day, how many of those thoughts are compassionate thoughts? And how many of those thoughts are me thoughts? And when you have a compassionate thought, sometimes, well, I can only speak for myself, but I pat myself on my back. Good boy. You had a kind, compassionate thought, which shows how rare it is. I mean, if they were happening all the time, you'd be fed up and bored with compassionate thoughts. But the fact that, I had a pure moment of compassionate love for other beings, it's a good day today. This is what we're looking at. No, none of us is without compassion. It's just, could there be more? And then we look at it more closely. These Pratyeka Buddhas that we don't meet, what have they got going for them? They've got a wonderful spiritual capital. They are natural, what can we call it, without sounding too wonderful. We are natural spiritual people, let's say. We are natural holy people. I mean, here in our group, people listening to this, we are the lights of the world. We really are, relatively speaking. It's wonderful. So we've got that going for us. There's an expression, I don't know if it works in every language, because not everyone here is native English speaker, but you know this English expression, resting on your laurels. You know this? Well, you're already doing pretty well. You are naturally, spiritually inclined. You've got a lot going for you, and a lot of this makes sense. You get it, you practice it. We have a lot going for us. The question is, how are you using your laurels? How are you using your spiritual attributes, your spiritual capital, where you're wealthy? This wealth, is it being used for you, or is it being used for everyone? This is what we're looking at. Pratyeka Buddhas are Dharma superstars. They got Dharma teachings mastered. It's in their DNA. They can't help seeing, observing, experiencing life without a Dharma interpretation. 100% excellent Dharma interpretation. That's not the problem. They understand interdependence, they understand impermanence, they understand suffering. So many of the basic topics. How are they using their capital, their skills? Is it for other beings? Then when we look at Pratyeka Buddhas, not really. It's being used for themselves, which is wonderful. That's one person heading towards freedom forever from samsara, but not heading towards recognition of the pure and overwhelming and natural love that's inside us all. So these are our 4 obstacles. And life after life after life after life in the past, in our bodhisattva journey, these 4 as very real active components of who we are and what we're doing with our life come up, and they are blocking this awareness of Buddha nature. So they need to be got rid of. And how do we get rid of them? 4 remedies, which, not surprisingly, are their opposites. These are who we are. Who we are is a result of habitual thinking, habitual reactivity, habitual emotions, habitual everything, habits. So we learn 4 new habitual ways of being to remedy these things. It's really very alchemical. You know, in chemistry, if you remember your chemistry classes, you've got a glass thing full of, acid. So it's acid. And you pour in alkali, and it becomes less and less and less acid till it's neutral. And you've got a salt. It's gone. What you poured in counteracted its basic nature, and something else emerged from it. So we have 4 new habits to cultivate, which are the antidotes. They're the obvious antidotes. So the first one is the hostility to Mahayana Dharma through, well, that's easy, attachment to self. Mahayana Dharma is you become everybody. You are everybody. Everybody counts. Their well-being is your well-being. Their suffering is your suffering. Their joy is your joy. We are part of an interconnected, endless family of sentient beings. That's who we are. We are them. That's the Bodhisattva way. But we're not there yet. We are me. So we're looking moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day, at this motivation and activity, the motivation which drives the activity, whereby we are motivated for self-benefit or for other benefit. So the remedy is Mahayana Dharma, training in all of the aspects of relative and ultimate bodhicitta. So we learn that in other places, 7-point mind training, all the bodhisattva training, but our ego's hostility to Mahayana Dharma, to giving ourselves and our time and everything we are, that we have, on a relative level to other beings, on an ultimate level to shunyata. So to understand that, then we have to go through all the Mahayana teachings, as we have done in our courses, bodhicitta, aspiration bodhicitta, practice bodhicitta, all of the details of that, learning it, applying it, remedies our historical ego-centeredness, and we work on it intelligently in a kindly way, gradually opening our hearts and our life and our activity to other beings. And then the interesting part, and in fact the key that really boosts, catalyzes, accelerates the whole process, is on an ultimate level. Now here it gets curious, and let's use a bit of language. Again, something that's, I can't say it's poorly translated, because if I said that, then I'd have to come up with a good translation. And so it's something that's untranslatable in a way. But the word in Tibetan, the term for sentient being, is drowa, literally meaning one who goes, going. So usually that's interpreted or explained as going from existence to existence in the round of existence as humans, animals, the other 6 realms. We are going, we are traveling. So some, like you say, adventurous translators, I don't think anybody actually says goers, which would be the literal translation for sentient beings, the goers, but you get translations something like that, and you get migrators or okay, well, it's fairly relevant, but let's try and go deeper, and let's go in a way which applies it, as always, to the mind and to ourselves. What is the drowa? What is the goer inside you? What is the sentient being? So we're looking, first obstacle, hostility to Mahayana Dharma, present in all the 6 realms. What is the goer, the drowa, the sentient being in there? It is, in a way, what is dynamic. As opposed to what's the opposite of what's dynamic? What is static? See, Buddha mind never changes. And we are shut off from it. We are shutting ourselves off from it because we are busy. We are dynamic. We are striving for this and for that. We are, when you look at our activities, our emotions, our thoughts, they are dynamic processes. They are stories that are going on. They're like arrows that have been launched. We are living hundreds, thousands of superimposed karmas where we are dynamic. Just one example, if I look at my daily life now, I like, and I'm ashamed to confess it because of the present state of the environment, but I do like log fires. I like sitting next to a log fire. I'm a bit of a pyromaniac in that sense. I mean, it's undue pleasure comes out of just sitting next to burning logs on a cold winter's evening. But that involves work. Either you have to buy them, or when I had trees that needed doctoring in the garden, then they needed cutting, and then you got work with an axe, and then you got to dry it, and then you got to bring it in, then you got to clean out the ashes, and so on. It's movement. It's a process. It's one of many of the processes of life and of thinking. When we look and you get the smell of it, the feel of it, we are busy. There is our dynamic world. And it's important for us. And we need to find that importance, that hard investment. And look and say, is this feeding ego, or is this nurturing the bodhisattva in me? On a relative level, if our drowa, where we are, and it's all those verbs, the verbs you learn when you learn a language, being, doing, going, making, these key verbs you learn, loving, that's what we learn, faire, aimer, aller, all these things are drowa, dynamic. So as long as we're going to carry on being a relative somebody somewhere, don't have much choice, then that dynamism, what we're thinking about, what we're feeling for, what we're actually doing and making our daily reality, like a log fire, or a soup, or a risotto, or whatever it is. Is this useful for our bodhisattva awakening, or is it reinforcing ego and this hostility to Mahayana Dharma? We need to look into it, and in a very beautiful, healthy, loving, but caring, but also diligent and disciplined way, gradually changing our existence for the better. Meaning, on a relative level, we are more and more doing things for everybody. On an ultimate level, we're trying to feel the need to be, the need to do, the need to go. And can you do without it? This is the great teaching of being in retreat. You put yourself lovingly and caringly in a place where you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything except prayers and meditation, and where you've got nobody to love except yourself or all sentient beings. We disempower the verbs to try and understand what it would be to let the timeless reality, which is beyond you, nothing to do with you, or me, even a bodhisattva journey, it just always has been. So pure, so peaceful, so perfect, everything is there. And the everything that's there makes our doing, sorry to say it, but so pathetic. So it's a bridge to go across. And the only way we can go across that bridge is by letting go our involvement in the 6 realms. It's a big journey of faith and commitment. Wonderful one. But that's what we're looking at here. I spent a lot of time today talking about this just to try and bring these few words to life. We've not even looked at the verses today, but to try and bring this first obstacle. You read about it, hostility to Mahayana Dharma. You say, well, I'm not hostile to Mahayana Dharma. And I say, you are. And we all are, when we start looking at how deeply involved are you in perpetuating your 6 realms. How are you still jealous and comparing yourself, and in competition? How are you still wanting this and that and so on? We are still very much in the 6 realms, so I wanted to bring that to life. So the first remedy is cultivating Mahayana Dharma, remedy to hostility. That makes sense. The second remedy, which is the strong religious beliefs, are to develop our deep understanding of shunyata, because those deeply entrenched other religious beliefs, or the non-religious beliefs that become automatic beliefs because we learnt them in school, science and the moral values of the society we live in today. We see a huge argument, woke, not woke. People have quite conflicting views in some parts of the world. In this particular time, it's the last 10 years they talk about this, the last 5 years. But we can see, whatever it is, it's always based on an idea of self, and the value of self, and the meaning of self, and a human being, having a human identity, having a life, respecting other people's lives. What is life? What is identity? What is the purpose? And then when we get to the actual religions, then some tell you you have a soul, some tell you there is a God, some tell you there are many gods, and so on. All of them are based on a notion of defined identity. As a persona, as a personal soul, as a self, an Atman, or as God, or in some of the Indian beliefs as what we would call the universe, or just existence with all of its potential, and prakrit and purush and so on. When we look at all of them, wonderful, they're mutekpa, they're on the way there, amazing. Beautiful religions with a lot of respect for life, for the mind, a lot of knowledge of meditation experience, of transcending ego, transcending self. So many wonderful faiths. But when we look at them then and say, they've gone so far, but not the whole way, or they're incapable of going the whole way, from the Buddhist point of view, and in terms of awakening to this perfect divine nature, sacred nature, then it's spoiled by labeling it as an identity, as a self. This is deeply, deeply fascinating. It's deeply philosophical. It's deeply scientific, because the problem is humans defining the sacred or God as a reflection of themselves from their own limitations. And we see the same thing in science. It's wonderful, the philosophy of science these days, the understanding of how we've built up our scientific knowledge from, through the centuries, but how from a certain point of view it's evolved and it's evolved. And it is almost impossible to shake off the roots of that. And like these days, understand the universe without all the paradigms that science developed in the past, with a completely open mind. And really, it's beautiful when you read about the minds of some of our great physicists in the last century. They really wanted to do this, shake off the scientific indoctrination and have a completely open, pure understanding of who we are as observers of a universe and how we translate that universe in terms of our own observing mechanisms. This is a problem in philosophy, it's a problem in science. It's what we're looking at in this second obstacle, which is deeply rooted assumptions. And how we get rid of that is by training in shunyata, where we use our wisdom to examine those assumptions ruthlessly and to know what is the truth, uncompromisingly what is the truth. So we have shunyata as teachings, but mainly when we bring it back to mind and myself, we have the training in shunyata through the method of Mahamudra, the method of Dzogchen and so on, method of the middle way of Majjhimaka. We have the actual way we work with our five senses and our perceptions to give every possible chance to, if there is an identity, if there is a self, if there is a soul, if there is a God, well, we're going to bloody well find it. We give it every possibility. We look everywhere. No holds barred. Nobody ever found one. There is a $10 trillion prize for the first Buddhist who finds one. If you find it, please send your answer in a stamped addressed envelope to... Nobody ever did. Not because they're telling themselves as a Buddhist, there is no self. Buddha said there is no self. But because you've looked everywhere. You've given everything a chance. Come on, bring it on. Come on, self, show yourself. Come on, God, show yourself. And we've explored the definitions, the fixed belief, our own natural assumptions. And we go into this amazing and quite dangerous space of shunyata, of taking apart our assumptions and delusions and projections. It's a huge and absolutely fascinating realm of inner awakening, let's say, and that will nurture our bodhicitta and help us to recognize our Buddha nature. The third thing is the fear of samsara. And so we need to counteract that with the Bodhisattva's teachings. We need to no longer see samsara as, what can you say? Well, to see it with fear. We need to see it with appreciation, joy, respect. To see in samsara the potential for wonder, for beauty, for meaning, So in that sense, samsara needs to be understood in the bodhisattva way as not something out there. It's not other people and their difficulties and life and all of its dangers and temptations and sordidness. That's the outer definition of samsara. The real definition of samsara is our own samsara, the way we get involved in it in a corrupt way, the way it makes us proud, the way it makes us jealous, the way people make us feel desire for all sorts of things, desire for them, desire for power, whatever. All the mind poisons. That's our samsara, not samsara out there. So how do we see that on the bodhisattva path? Well, it's a wonderful opportunity. When there is anger and hate and resent, that's an opportunity for love. When there is jealousy, that is an opportunity to see the potential Buddha in the person you're jealous of and be so happy that they have good qualities. When we see our own ignorance, it's wonderful. It's an opportunity for wisdom. Wisdom has to come out of ignorance, doesn't it? That's what we're talking about. Ignorance goes and you know. At first you didn't know, and then you learn, and then you know, and the ignorance is gone. So when we see our own stupidity and ignorance, it's wonderful. This is such a ground for learning. So we don't fear our samsara. And so in the layers, it means that when there's the samsara out there, things that are upsetting, let's say, upsetting people, upsetting circumstances, upsetting news, upsetting stuff happening. When there is that, and that makes us upset, or he or she makes us upset and angry, then we have to think as bodhisattvas, thank you. This is wonderful. This is an opportunity for love, for loving kindness, for wisdom, for understanding why that is as it is in my life, through my karma, through its own karma, through that person's own karma, through our coming together karma. It's an opportunity for wisdom, it's an opportunity for love, it's an opportunity for peace, where instead of being upset, which is a terrible state, our mind is disturbed, it can't settle. It's there, and it's in a knot, and it wants to do something, and it wants harm to come to somebody else or whatever. That's not nice. It's an opportunity for peace, for so many good qualities. So, I've just said a few things. The Bodhisattva path is a wonderful, intelligent, well-tried way of working with who we are, with our mind, so that our fear of samsara can go and we can understand, we can start to find the resource inside us of our own natural love and wisdom that comes from Buddha nature. So that's our third remedy. And then our fourth is lack of compassion. And so there we just simply do the meditations of loving kindness and compassion and actually develop them in ourselves So there we have 4 remedies to our 4 obstacles. So there we've covered points 1 and 2. What is this actual nature? It's purity that's free. We saw that, of the different levels of impurity, klesha, dualistic thinking, dualistic split, ignorance, and so on. Obstacles to meditation. That's the purity, point 1. Point 2, the cause for that purity to become manifest is to work on the 4 obstacles with the 4 remedies. Now in point 3, what we're going to consider now is fruition. This same Buddha nature, now we're looking at it, is when, because we worked on the 4 remedies, step by step through all the stages of the Bodhisattva path, what will it be in terms of an outcome, a fruition, a result? And that's where we have to stop now, and we're just, how can you say, leading ourselves into the next session. We'll see we get a 4-fold result, which is very, very interesting in Buddhist terms. We see that Buddha nature is purity. It is our true self. It is bliss or happiness, and it is lasting. These are almost related to these 4 obstacles and their 4 remedies. So now as an outcome, we've got purity and self and happiness and lastingness. This is why some Buddhists, some Buddhist traditions don't feel comfortable with the 3rd turning and the wheel of Dharma. They say, oh, stop. All the Buddha's teaching is about impurity. Everything. Impurity everywhere. Just getting out of it, putting an end to it, stopping the whole show so there's nothing left. It's not about a sacred divine purity. And then all the Buddha's teaching is about anatma, no self. And now you've got true identity. You've gone the way of all the other religions. You've unbuddha'd yourself. You've unbuddhisted yourself. You've become a heretic within your own faith. And then happiness, Buddha taught, there's no happiness. There's suffering. And the whole journey is to get out of suffering. But that doesn't mean happiness. Happiness and suffering, they're just relative things in terms of each other. You stop banging your head against the wall, happiness, because the suffering stopped. There is no ultimate happiness. Buddha never taught ultimate happiness. And then permanence. Buddha taught everything's impermanent. All phenomena are by nature impermanent. In Tibetan, it's part of the logic you learn when you learn basic Buddhism. Chur tamche mitokpa. Oh, it's when they do these debates, that's basic maxim. Everything's impermanent. Nothing lasts. So next time, when we come back, we're going to look at the Buddha nature teachings to see that when you get there, when it's the fruition of your bodhisattva path, from 10th level bodhisattva to enlightenment, you have purity, you have true self, you have happiness, and you have permanence. this may be the point you want to give up this course, because you think, this don't sound like none of the Buddhism that I've heard so far, and where are we going? So, of course, it is very meaningful. We're going to have to go with words into a reality beyond words that transcends duality. The duality of pure, impure, the duality of self, no self, the duality of happiness and suffering, and the duality of permanent and impermanence. We're saying that what will be said in the next session is how Buddha nature, this quintessential nature of those who've gone beyond, has these 4 key qualities. So that's in 2 weeks' time. This is February, short month. So the next Saturday is our Tonglen, monthly Tonglen. And we come back in 2 weeks' time to look more at fruition as these 4 qualities. Let's dedicate anything that was good and useful today. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. By the main enemy, mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become free from the ocean of existence, troubled by its waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. In those in whom it has arisen, may its development know no setbacks. May it increase ever more and more. And through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. So thank you very, very much. Your turn.
Ken, thank you so much for such. Today feels like it's been a really rich soup of stuff that's brought together so many things from past stuff in a very practical way, especially when you were talking about the really breaking down the obstacles and the remedies.
Mm-hmm.
That's some very useful practical questions for reflection. And some of those have come up actually in some of, not just meditation, but as some reflection anyway. But that's kind of brought things together in a really condensed way, and it's been very useful. I did have one question. It's a little bit general, but I'm not a Christian, but I was obviously brought up to some extent and surrounded by that tradition. And I've always been curious about the gap in the account about Jesus' life, because very interesting character. And I'm just wondering, I've seen some stuff that indicates that he might have actually traveled east and encountered, if not actually had the teachings of Buddhism. And I was wondering what your thoughts are, or what your understanding is about any links between his teachings, which are very distinct from the Old Testament teachings, and any Buddhist influences there.
Yeah.
Another question for this format, then just that's fine. But I wanted to ask you that for some time.
Yeah. Well, it's quite certainly possible. More than possible is probably likely. But then further than that, we don't have any evidence. And various people put a claim to that period in Jesus's life that we don't know where he was, or obviously he got a transmission of something that he brought back and promoted in the year or so that we have of his actual teachings. It's not very long. He only taught for about a year. The people who said he went to Tibet or to Ladakh, that evidence doesn't really hold water. There's too little supporting evidence. It doesn't really fit with the timeline of what was happening in India and Ladakh. But the point is, at the time of Jesus, there was an incredible flow of knowledge across the trade routes, the Silk Road, and you see how stuff traveled is just amazing. You get Viking stuff traveling, and later on, before that, not just goods traveled, ideas traveled, people traveled with caravans to get the ideas. And the key area, one key area is before Ladakh, where some people say he went. It's around the Swat Valley, Gandhara. At the time of Jesus, that had very, very flourishing Buddhism, depending where you went. Early on, it had very flourishing Buddhism. The problem is it's a passage. So conquerors came through, the Huns, there were various. So they destroyed what was in their passage, but then they went through the main passages, which meant what was off the side valleys survived. So monasteries, traditions, ashrams, yogis, up in that area, yoginis as well. They were very, very powerful women of wisdom that the Buddhists from central India would go to. Anyway, there could be a lot said for that. There's an interesting line of inquiry to follow up with this whole thing of his name, which is Jesus of Nazareth, when it seems that Nazareth at the time of Jesus wasn't that much of a big deal. It was in between. It had been a big town before Jesus' time. It was almost in ruins at Jesus' time, and it grew up again afterwards. But Jesus the Nazarene, and there you have the Nazarenes, which were a Buddhist-influenced Jewish sect. They had the only Jewish tradition that had monasticism, and they had lay vows very similar to Buddhist lay vows. John the Baptist belonged to that, and he baptized people into this Nazarene tradition, which had quite a strong Buddhist influence. So that's quite interesting.
I never knew that. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And if I could ask, first of all, thank you for clarifying the Pratyeka Buddhas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if the same could be said about the Arhants.
Yeah, I mean, Arhats are the ones who did the whole journey of the Shravakas or the Pratyeka Buddhas. With the Arhats, that's those who've reached the end. It's in one aspect, they're all the same. The word Arhat itself means that they have gone beyond suffering. So what they've got rid of is the same for all Arhats. They've got rid of karma, and they've got rid of the causes of karma, which are the mind poisons, kleshas, and they've got rid of the cause of the mind poisons, which is belief in a personal self. So what they've got rid of is the same for all Arhats. But then if we don't consider what they've got rid of, but what they've become, then we get four types of Arhats. They are called with remains or without remains, and with adornments or without adornments. So the adornments are the adornments of knowledge and acquired skills, and in particular, knowledge of the 12 links of interdependence, which, I mean, the Pratyeka Buddhas, they are like, like in science, we have great minds that can get themselves around stuff that very few other scientists can, because they're just brilliant and they're insightful and so on, are great scientists. So like that, in the realm of interdependence, which means basically understanding what's going on. See, our material science understands very well material matter. 12 Links of Interdependence understands mind and matter working together to make the reality we experience. Has a huge mental component to it. So these are the superstars. They really are so knowledgeable. And so the ones either with or without remains that have the adornments, they are the Pratyeka Buddhas. And the ones without the adornments, they are mainly the Shravaka Arhats.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then an area that's not talked about much in detail or with examples is that the way in the Mahayana we understand Arhats is that they got to the end of their path and they are super ready to go on a Mahayana path because they've already got rid of karma and klesha and belief in a self. Once they are launched, they will go very quickly on a bodhisattva path. So looking at the ones who've been launched, who are, what can you say, basically arhats, but now they're on the bodhisattva path. So then you get these famous 16 arhats that are very big in Chinese Buddhism and that are also in Tibetan Buddhism, where they become guardians. They are looking after the teachings, they're looking after the Buddhist nations and populations over the world in a very powerful and kindly way. That's interesting.
Are the words Pratyeka Buddha and Arhats used interchangeably, or is there
No.
real? No. Can you say
No.
what the difference is?
Yeah. Arhat means gone beyond suffering. That's it. So anyone who's gone beyond suffering is an arhat, and even the Buddha is often referred to as the arhat, with a sort of capital A, the main one. The qualification to become an arhat is to be forever out of the cycle of rebirth. You'll never be reborn again because you've done all the work to take away the causes of rebirth. And then amongst the arhats, very few, like minority, are Pratyeka Buddhas. Pratyeka Buddhas they're on a path which ends up with them becoming Pratyeka Buddha Arhats. Arhats, the end of their journey. When we look at their path, then we find that they are, well, then we look at their path. When we do that, sorry, it's always numbers. They've got 6 qualities. His finger says that's 6 qualities. Okay, so there are 3 defining qualities that make Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. And it is a fear of samsara is the one, a longing for nirvana in terms of freedom from samsara is 2. So those 2 go together. Fear of samsara, a longing for the end of samsara, which is nirvana, and then little compassion. Doesn't mean they don't have compassion, but they are not mainly driven by compassion, which is the bodhisattva's way. They have only little compassion. And then amongst the Shravakas, the minority become Pratyeka Buddhas because basically they've got 3 more qualities, which is first one, they are by their own nature loners. They can't say they don't like people very much, but they don't need people. They don't get on with people. So they are loners. And then they divide into two sorts. The loners, who are called rhinoceros-like Pratyeka Buddhas, so like one horn, and they really like to be just themselves. And then there are the parrot-like Pratyeka Buddhas, where they like to be in a little group, enough very like-minded people to be able to support each other, but no more than that. Certainly no widespread public activity or anything. So they are loners, that's one thing. And the second is they are not inclined to help people except by example. And third is they like to keep quiet about their teachers. These are three characteristics. So they're very cagey about their own teachers, if they have them. Yeah.
Wow.
That's their definition. And it's easy to see that in a negative way. And it's not. It's not. I mean, from a bodhisattva's point of view, we just speak so beautifully of our teachers because we value them so much and what they give us, and we want other people to benefit. It's a different mentality where you've got something very sacred and special that's worked for you. But then when you look round and you see just how confused people are and how they bring their own rubbish to whatever there is in the way of spirituality, you are very, very wary of sharing it. It's in that kind of a way. They keep quiet about their teachers. Mainly, also, what they are and what they believe in is being your own teacher. Dharma as being everything. And, there are human teachers, but they're not the important thing. Dharma is the thing. So interdependence itself, impermanence itself is teaching you all the time from the way life is. So they're quite positive qualities, but they do make a certain very rare, very special type of very accomplished Dharma being that we call Pratyeka Buddhas. And there's not that much about them. We don't come across them generally in our world. These days, they say it's centuries and centuries since there has been an arhat, I think, declared in the Theravada world. I don't know about that. So it's hard enough to find an arhat, to find a Pratyeka Buddha, or we won't. And then, well, I don't know, maybe I should stop there, because otherwise it's endless information, unless you want to know more about Pratyeka Buddhas. But you want to know more? Or is there another question, different question?
Ken, could I just quickly follow on from what Chris asked about Jesus? Were the Nazarenes the same as the Essenes?
No, I don't think so. But if you check out Nazarenes, you should find something, and what they believed. And so where Jesus was baptized by John, by the River Jordan, was the location of a Nazarene monastery. Right? So that's quite, it seems. So I've not had the time really to check out, double check, triple check all the facts of this. but it's certainly an interesting connection with the basic teachings of love your neighbor, love God, that kind of thing. It's very much like bodhicitta on a relative level. The respect we have for each other, and on an ultimate level, respect for the shunyata, the true nature of being. But also, I don't want to, like I say, disrespect the Nazarenes by projecting my Buddhist bodhisattva beliefs onto them. I would like to really know what they believe, and I don't know how much information we got left, quite honestly. But the fact that whoever Jesus was, that he went to John for baptism, and John was very definitely part of this Nazarene, as far as we can tell, movement, is quite curious.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, the timeline for how Buddhism went to Tibet never made any sense for Jesus going to Tibet to learn about Buddhism. So I thought that was very funny. But yeah, but the Gandhara seems a far more likely possibility. And as you say, it's on the trade route. So it could have been that somebody from Gandhara either met him halfway on the trade route or went the whole way. So we just don't know.
Yeah.
But he obviously met somebody, whether it's John the Baptist or somebody else. Yeah. You made the comment, I thought it was very interesting, about a few notes of sacred music having this effect on you after 3. In my case, it's the other way around. I never got Christianity. I've never been a Christian, and I never got it, although I grew up in a Christian world. Whereas Tibetan music does the same thing for me as Christian music does. As you know, my friend is a singer who uses sound as to try and help people towards awakening. But I was watching a video of a professor in a Canadian university who specializes in sound and energy and so forth. And he was explaining, what he was saying was that it's only like 5,000 years that human beings have used words, language, or writing to communicate. And he's saying before that, human beings use sound, whether it be music or some sort of sound, for thousands of years before that. So it's like the sound gets to us directly, whereas language and intellectual study is very useful, but it's a distraction. In one way, it's not very helpful because it blocks us from this direct experience.
Yeah, you've been very lucky because your friend is, to my mind, makes beautiful sound and music. And then, like Tibetan ritual instruments, these radongs, the very deep, long horns, and the jalings, the ones that are like oboes and so on. The purpose of that music is basically to shock. That's how it's defined in the time. It's not meant to please or seduce. It's meant to shock your system, to wake you up specifically. So it's different from beauty. It's not seeking beauty. It's seeking to shock. And then a lot of Tibetan folk music is very, it's boring. For me, it's boring when you see people in villages, when they hold hands and they dance and they flap around the way they do. It's nice. It's like folk music all over the world, but it doesn't sort of, after 3 seconds, put your hair on end and take you to another place like your friend does when she sings. She sings beautifully. She has the power of music, let's say.
Yeah. In fact, dare I say it, a lot of Tibetans don't like what she does because she doesn't do Tibetan traditional folk songs.
Yeah.
She developed something between that and the religious music of Tibet.
Mm.
In one sense, she also uses a shock within her singing because she suddenly changed from the sort of what I call the pure angelic singing, and then suddenly she'll go into what I call her mountain voice,
Mm.
sort of a guttural voice, which is quite different, and that always gives me a bit of a shock.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a bit like Gaelic singing. The singing from some of the singing from the islands, and yeah. Okay, so that's that. I saw a question pop up about is it ah or is it om, which is the basic sound. Um, so Neil, maybe you can answer this question with that's just popped up. So it's, let's say it's ah. Well, that's what they say, right? And it comes from what, Dharma went to Tibet in the 7th and 8th centuries of our era. It's a long time after Buddha. The Buddhism that went came mainly from India. And then what came from China came from India via China into Tibet. So because it came so late, the myths or the stories or the legends that came with Dharma came. So one of the legends is that Sanskrit is the language of the gods, given by the gods to India, and all the scriptures were in various forms of this original Sanskrit, or all these variants like Pali and so on. And so the language itself is sacred. And in Sanskrit, every letter is based on the sound ah. Like in English, you get A, B. The vowel sound is different. C, D, they're all E sound. F, G, H, K, P. They've got different vowel sounds, our letters. The Sanskrit alphabet, everything is an ah sound. So ah is supposed to be the basis for the whole language. There's one hell of a debate going on because there's linguistic research has found that Sanskrit didn't originate in India from the gods, as the Indians believe and as the Vedas believe, and as but that it came from, well, quite far away, first from Central Asia. But when you look into the roots of Sanskrit, according to linguistic research, you come back to something like Proto-Aramaean, and we're back in the same roots that we've got for our languages. This is very painful for some Indians because of the British occupation and the idea that civilization came from the outside to a primitive people. So there are lots of Hindu nationalists who will refuse to accept that Sanskrit came in through the invading tribes from Central Asia who pushed back the indigenous population. For them, no, it had to come from the gods in India itself. So Tibetans firmly believe that Sanskrit is the language of the gods, and so that Sanskrit in itself is sacred, and that this basic sound ah, from which all the letters come and all the languages evolved, is very, very sacred sound. It's good. I mean, if you believe that, then it works. if you make that your paradigm and your reality, then it can work. But it's one of these interesting cases where we need a huge international conference between linguists, scientists, top Buddhists like the Dalai Lama, the Karmapa, and so on, and they kind of thrash it out and come to a conclusion. Okay, well, I think that's us today. We had a long session. So see you again for this course in 2 weeks' time. Unless I see you next Saturday. Yep.
I'm terribly sorry, but just before you go, could I ask who the singer was?
Yeah, Neil. Yeah. Well,
in order to do, like, if it's not completely relaxed, you might, and it's like you might end up saying ma or da. But in order to say om, you also have to shape your mouth. But if your mouth is completely relaxed, you say ah.
Well, in the Tantras, they say the absolutely natural sound of the breath. It's a very important topic in Vajrayana practice. The natural sound of the in-breath is om, as you listen. Right? The natural sound of the resting breath is aha. And the natural sound of the out-breath is hum. Om, ah, as it rests. Hum. And a lot of the most deep yogic practice in retreat is based on that, where you're not making the sounds, you're listening to your own breath as om, ah, hum.
Oh, that makes sense. Total sense.
And so the ah, as you hold your breath, is a beautiful place. Okay. See you next 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye now.
Ta very much.
Thanks, bye.
Take care.
Ta now.